Beauty for brokenness, hope for despair. Lord, in the suffering, this is our prayer. Bread for the children, justice, joy, peace. Sunrise to sunset, your kingdom increase. Shelter for fragile lives, cure for their ills. Work for the craftsmen, trade for their skills. Land for the dispossessed, rights for the weak. Voices to plead the cause of those who can't speak. God of the poor, friend of the weak, give us compassion, we pray. Melt our cold hearts, let tears fall like rain. Come change our love from a spark to a flame. Refuge from cruel wars, havens from fear. Cities for sanctuary, freedoms to share. Peace to the killing fields, scorched earth to green. Christ for the bitterness, his cross for the pain. God of the poor, friend of the weak, give us compassion, we pray. Melt our cold hearts, let tears fall like rain. Come change our love from a spark to a flame. Rest for the ravished earth, oceans and streams, plundered and poisoned, our future, our dreams. Lord, and our madness, carelessness, greed, make us content with the things that we need. God of the poor, friend of the weak, give us compassion, we pray. Melt our cold hearts, let tears fall like rain. Come change our love from a spark to a flame. Lighten our darkness, breathe on this flame, until your justice burns brightly again. Until the nations learn of your ways, seek your salvation and bring you their praise. God of the poor, friend of the weak, give us compassion, we pray. Melt our cold hearts, let tears fall like rain. Come change our love from a spark to a flame.
Okay, so we will start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you ill or in prison and visit you? Dear Jesus, Thank you for inviting us to come away from the busyness that we have today so that we can spend some quality time with your presence. Help us tonight to allow the Holy Spirit to guide us as we encounter you through your words. As we dialogue with you, help us to remain in your loving embrace so that we can learn how to look through your eyes at the people around us. Allow us to be open-minded and patient so that we can learn to recognize that there's love. When there's love, that's when you are present. With this, we give glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit. As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Okay, hi everyone again. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Paola, and I'm helping the Bourbon Day community with the School of the Word series. So if Letty didn't mention just now, we'll be entering into the Word right now. I'll be sharing some of my sharings later on, and then we'll have a short period of silence where we'll enter the Word and pray. Okay, so okay, as Letty said just now, we are into this final edition of the Easter School of the Word series. You know, right? We are still very much in the season of Easter, okay, celebrating the resurrection of Jesus. Sometimes, right, it feels a little disconcerting when we transition so quickly from the solemnity of Lent to the joyful celebration of Easter just within those 3 days. Yeah, gone like that. We heard in the first week that the hallmark of our Christian faith and identity lies in the resurrection of Jesus. But from lived experiences, this passing from death to life, from sadness to joy, doesn't just happen over a weekend. And it involves this process of faith formation. 2 weeks ago, we prayed with the importance of developing a close relationship with the Holy Spirit as the giver of life, who can help us make sense of this faith in the context of our daily lives. Last week, we also prayed with how Jesus gave us all of his love and life by entrusting his whole body into our hands in the form of the Eucharist. As he said to his disciples during the washing of feet at the Last Supper, "I have given you a model to follow, so that as I have done for you, you should also do." In today's reading of the True Vine, which can be found in John 15, we are reminded of his commandment for us to love one another as he loved us. He then urged us to remain in me as I in you, so that we can find strength to share his love and be his witness, living a life of fullness, bearing fruits, if we prayed with the PFL today. Tonight, we will continue with the Easter theme of encountering the resurrected Jesus, who is alive and present in the least of the people around us. The passage which we'll be praying tonight can be found in Matthew 25, 31 to 46. So Jesus reveals to us how we can encounter his living presence amongst the people in our everyday lives. The passage starts with the arrival of the Son of Man, surrounded by angels, with all the nations assembled before him. Then he goes on to separate them like a shepherd separating sheep from goats on his right and left. He then told those on the right that they will inherit his kingdom, as he said this, "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. A stranger, and you welcomed me. Naked, and you clothed me. Ill, and you cared for me. In prison, and you visited me." Then, turning to those people on his left, he rebuked and sent them to eternal punishment, because they didn't care for him as he described earlier. When he passed the judgment on them, both groups and responded in similar ways, asking when they had actually encountered him. His reply to them was this: "Whatever you did or did not do for one of these least brothers of mine, you did or did not do for me." So, as I prayed and reflected on my encounters with the people I interact with daily, many questions arose, obviously, right? Of which is asking Jesus, right, who exactly are the least of his people that he wants us to pay attention to. Through a process, I came to understand some messages on what it means to have this personal encounter with the living Jesus among us. Essentially, in order to meet Jesus in others, we have to first encounter him in ourselves. This encounter establishes our identity and relationship with him as followers and friends of Christ. As he said, "You are my friends." By rooting ourselves firmly in his words and teaching, we, like the early disciples, have to make constant, decisive choices on what it means to commit ourselves as Christians. This means we need a whole array of support to keep us on track, to model our lives after him. We heard in past weeks that this involves developing a close relationship with his advocate, the Holy Spirit, which we'll be receiving soon, through prayers and regular nourishment from the Eucharist. If we are not rooted in his vine, we will not be able to consciously walk out of our tomb daily and rise with him as Easter people. Next, it is only when we experience the embrace of his love and living presence in us, especially in vulnerable moments of our lives, then can we attempt to look through his eyes. His lens of compassion, mercy, and love are focused on those who are vulnerable and suffering, which in the eyes of our society, right, are considered the least of the people. As he said in Matthew 9:12-13, those who are well do not need a physician, but the sick do. Go and learn the meaning of the words. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. I did not come to call the righteous, but sinners. Jesus had generously given us hints on where to seek his living presence. But, it's not so straightforward. Just for us to just pick and determine by ourselves who the truly vulnerable and suffering ones are. I'm sure we are well aware that there are many who masquerade under the namesake of the poor, hungry and thirsty, oppressed, sick, marginalized, etc., to tug at our very unreliable human emotions. In other words, we are constantly at risk of getting scammed. So, who exactly are the least of the people? Are they a specific group of people who are vulnerable and suffering? Or are they a general group, like you and I, who experience transient suffering due to circumstances at some point of our lives? This question of who are the least of the people requires discernment with Jesus in our hearts. It is complex and confusing. That's why in the passage, we find that both groups were also puzzled by their own actions and or lack of it towards Jesus. So I'll share with you an interesting situation that happened to me recently. For those of you who don't know me, I work in a healthcare setting and I was covering for my colleague during her leave of absence. So one day, I was attending to one of her clients who had been absent for a while. While trying to assess how he had been coping, this gentleman, we'll call him A, grew impatient and burst out at me. His tone was arrogant and accusatory, berating our roles as healthcare professionals and demanded that I should just follow doctor's orders or whatever notes my colleagues had left for me. I barely got to tell him that I already had a discussion with my colleague when he got more defensive. Thankfully, another colleague whom he's somewhat familiar with stepped in to try to de-escalate the situation. But he continued to provoke with more unpleasant words, even as we tried to reason with him, assuring him that we were trying to clarify matters because his answers were inconsistent and ambiguous. But he was not in a space to listen to reasons and was only preoccupied with his own suffering and pain. So my colleague offered to settle him while I gladly left. Now, I'll be lying if I said that the incident didn't affect me emotionally. Despite the assurance from my colleagues who are familiar with his notorious behavior, I still felt lousy and disturbed for the rest of the week. What made matters worse was someone telling me that A was a fellow Christian. I felt cornered, basically. As I reflected this in my prayers to Jesus, I asked for wisdom and strength to reconcile my dilemma of trying to show compassion towards this person whose physical impairments were considered mild compared to his obnoxious attitude. The repulse in my emotions took a while to diffuse. Then, a week later, I attended to another gentleman, we'll call him L, whose physical impairments were more severe than A. The topic of how L ended up having a stroke came up. So because we work in an open concept kind of environment, he mentioned that he overheard the whole fiasco the previous week, so it was loud and embarrassing. Then he asked me how I felt and if I was okay. I told him truthfully that it's one of those situations we have to deal with. Then I said that I had to move on after taking some time to process. Otherwise, the mental trauma will be detrimental to my health, and I won't be able to continue fulfilling my role to help others. Then he quietly said that he had a stroke right after having a heated argument with a friend who behaved exactly like A. He added that he believed the exchange with this friend was so intense that both his mental and physical body was unable to cope with the distress he experienced, hence immediately leading to his stroke. We, just kind of looked at each other with a silent acknowledgement and redirected our attention to the optimism and laughter that he always brings to my session. Whenever I bring these situations to my dialogue with Jesus, it always involves a hard, bare awe session. Sometimes I get preoccupied with my own failings that I overdo in the self-blame and self-pity department. Other times, when I'm so consumed by my emotions and rage, it becomes everyone else's fault except mine. I asked Jesus, who are the least of the people in situations like these? You know what? There's no straightforward answers. And there are many examples in the context of our daily lives and society today where we struggle to identify who are the true hungry ones. Are they those hungry from physical malnourishment or those hungry for power and pride? Who are the true thirsty ones? Those dehydrated from care and concern from others or those thirsty for fame, lust, and avarice? Who are the true isolated ones? Those who have been oppressed and bullied, or those adamant that their self-righteous way are the only way to live? Who are the true sick ones? The physical, mental, and spiritually ill, or those who have capacity to demand their own self-serving desires? Who are the true sinners? The ones who defy the human-made laws of society, or those whose lives are void of God's love? Despite L, the second gentleman, own vulnerabilities and state of suffering, he still showed me that he was capable of showing concern for others. Coincidentally, it was his, cheerful demeanor that buffeted me with high spirits, really just prior to my interaction with A, before it crashed. Where A, the Christian, demonstrated to me that his incapability to be cordial to others points to an emptiness in him, with only his self-serving interest in mind. L taught me that his self-giving demeanor is what Jesus had been teaching us to model after. From washing the feet of Judas, who later betrayed him, to forgiving the thief on the cross, despite his own human suffering. At the end, Jesus demonstrated sincere humility to serve because he loves us. This attitude to serve like he did is how we are called to encounter him in the least of the people, with sincere humility. it is not just about fulfilling a Christian duty of moral works, but rather we are called to reach into the depths of love we receive from Him to witness how deprivation from God's love makes one vulnerable. We are precisely called to help fill the void in the least of these people's life by sharing and witnessing God's love, just like how Jesus pointed us to His Father's love. We are also reminded that as different as we all are, we profess our faith to the same resurrected Jesus as one body and spirit. In doing so, we acknowledge that we belong together to this larger body of Christ. And what does it mean to be a member of the body of Christ? How do we feel being co-members with people whom we don't like very much or don't share similar culture, beliefs, values, etc. as us? St. Paul in the first letter to Corinthians gives us a cue when he said, "Indeed, the parts of the body that seem to be weaker are all the more necessary, and those parts of the body that we consider less honorable, we surround with greater honor." Then he continued, "But God has so constructed the body as to give greater honor to a part that is without it, so that there may be no division in the body. If one part suffers, all the parts suffer. If one part is honored, all the parts share its joy." I related my incident to my colleague after she returned. She shared how she also struggled with A. We both felt, a sense of pity that he couldn't look beyond his own interests. And well, she dread seeing him because it drains her energy, right? But she had to persevere for professional reasons. And at the end of it, right, it seemed that I had the easy way out because I no longer had to face this person, fingers crossed. And this leads to the last message of my prayer on what happens after we identify who the vulnerable people Jesus wants us to pay attention to. To the people who were punished in the passage, the king said, "Amen, I say to you, what you did not do for one of these least ones, you did not do for me." Even after discerning and identifying who the vulnerable people are in our lives, we still have free will to choose the type of response to encounter the living Jesus in them. Those who eventually got rewarded are those who modeled after Jesus to go beyond their own self and serve from the heart to elevate sufferings. Those who weren't rewarded were those who either intentionally aggravated the sufferings of the vulnerable or remained indifferent and did nothing. So it is here where most of us tend to walk this gray space of avoidance, thinking as long as we do no harm means we are doing good. It's not as simple as that. Many times when we meet difficult situations or people whom we do not like in our daily dealings, we sometimes get so overwhelmed that we make certain emotional choices, such as ignoring or shoving the problem or people out of sight, out of mind, as a way of coping with the interaction. The act of indifference, whether intentional or not, is still a choice we make in response to the suffering of the vulnerable. And it is not to say, that we should always be so enthusiastic or overly righteous to serve every vulnerable being we encounter. Sometimes, just sometimes, we have to exercise some self-awareness that it is a matter of timing and readiness. There are again no straightforward answers here, but my main takeaway was that I don't think Jesus will fault us for being indifferent in that moment if we communicate to him our struggles and own up to him that we are also at our most vulnerable point. Only Jesus will know and can judge our true intentions and the choices we make. Whether it is based out of love, but lacks the strength and capacity to be put into action, is this discussion that we constantly have to pray and seek his enlightenment. So we're going to spend some time hopefully we can start opening up to Jesus in our hearts. There'll be some question to help us to reflect and guide. But most importantly, just allow the Holy Spirit to lead you through his words and message meant for you. So you can switch off your camera and just remain here. We'll be going off for a silent prayer for 20 minutes, and I'll be flashing the passages online.